My name is Naomi Carter, and this is my testimony. I never thought much about death. I believed in God, prayed when I could, and tried to be a good person. But life was hard. As a single mother raising two boys in Atlanta, I worked two jobs to keep food on the table. Stress was a constant companion, but I pushed through until the day my body gave out. It happened so fast. One moment, I was at my desk at the call center, feeling a sharp pain in my chest. The next, I was on the floor, gasping for air. My coworkers screamed for help, but I could barely hear them. The world around me blurred, voices became distant, and suddenly, everything went dark. Then, I was somewhere else. At first, I felt weightless, as if I had been lifted out of my body. The pain was gone. The struggle, the stress, the exhaustion, all vanished. I looked down and saw myself lying lifeless on the office floor, paramedics rushing in, my coworkers in shock, but I wasn't afraid. A tunnel of light appeared, pulling me forward. I felt warmth, peace, and an overwhelming sense of love. I knew I was dead, yet I was more alive than ever. As I moved through the tunnel, I heard something, music unlike anything on earth. It was not just sound but emotion, a harmony that resonated deep in my soul. Then the light expanded, and I found myself standing in a place beyond words. A realm so beautiful, so pure, that I knew it could only be heaven. A figure stood before me, radiating an indescribable brilliance. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew who he was. My soul recognized him instantly. It was Jesus. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by his presence. Love poured from him like an ocean, washing away every pain, every fear, every doubt. He reached out his hand, and as soon as he touched me, I felt every burden I had ever carried dissolve. "Naomi," he said, his voice like a melody of truth and power, "there is something I must show you." And in an instant, the scene around me changed. The moment Jesus touched me, everything around us shifted. The brilliant light of heaven faded into a vast open space, unlike anything I had ever seen. It was neither earth nor the heaven I had expected. It was a realm of understanding, where truth was not just spoken but revealed in its purest form. I could feel it in the air, in my spirit, in the very essence of this place. I stood beside Jesus, unable to take my eyes off him. Though I couldn't see his face clearly, his presence was unmistakable. He radiated a love so overwhelming that it made me feel weightless, as if I had been unshackled from all the pain, regret, and weariness of my earthly life. "Naomi," he said again, his voice carrying both authority and gentleness. "There is much you must see." With a simple motion of his hand, a vision unfolded before me, more vivid than any dream. It was as if I had stepped outside of time, looking down upon the world from a perspective I had never known before. I saw the earth, spinning slowly, bathed in a glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. But as I watched, shadows began to creep across it. Dark, heavy forces moving over nations, over cities, over people. I saw division, hatred, suffering. I saw people turning against one another, not because of who they were, but because of fear, ignorance, and pain passed down through generations. Tears welled in my eyes as I witnessed the weight of human struggles. Racism, war, greed, injustice. I could feel it all as if it were my own burden. It crushed the hearts of millions, separating them not just from each other, but from God himself. I turned to Jesus, overwhelmed. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because the world has forgotten what love truly is," he said. "They have built walls where I have made bridges. They have chosen division where I have called for unity. And the greatest deception of all is that they believe their differences define them more than my love does." As he spoke, the vision shifted. I saw people of every race, every culture, every background, walking in separate directions, blinded by anger, pride, and wounds that had never healed. Some carried the chains of history, weighed down by the sins of generations before them. Others built walls around their hearts, afraid to embrace those they had been taught to see as different. But then something changed. A light began to spread, cutting through the darkness. It came not from governments, not from leaders or institutions, but from people. Ordinary people whose hearts had been touched by the truth of God's love. I saw hands reaching across barriers, healing words spoken where once there had been curses. I saw forgiveness where there had been hatred, understanding where there had been ignorance. I saw what could be. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with sorrow and hope all at once. Naomi, the world is at a crossroads. They can choose love or they can choose fear. But time is short and many do not realize how blind they have become. His words echoed in my spirit, shaking me to my core. I knew this vision was not just for me. It was for the world. It was a warning, but also a promise. Love had not been lost, but it had been buried beneath generations of pain. And only by returning to God, truly returning, could humanity find its way back. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face. "What can I do?" I whispered. "How can I make a difference?" Jesus reached out, lifting me up with a touch so powerful it felt like fire and water at the same time. "There is more I must show you." And with those words, the vision shifted again, pulling me deeper into the revelation that would change everything. Jesus' words hung in the air like thunder. "There is more I must show you." Before I could even process what I had already seen, the vision shifted once more. The warmth of his presence remained, but the scene before me grew heavier, more solemn. I found myself standing in what felt like an endless space, neither sky nor earth beneath me, only the presence of something vast, something beyond comprehension. In front of me, a great multitude of people stood in silence. They stretched far beyond what my eyes could see, men and women from every nation, every background, every time in history. Some faces were filled with light and peace, their eyes glowing with a deep love I couldn't explain. Others looked confused, afraid, even tormented, as if the weight of something unseen pressed upon them. Then I heard it, a voice, powerful beyond anything I had ever imagined, echoed through the space, not just heard with ears, but felt in my very soul. It was the voice of God. All shall give an account. At that moment, I understood. This was the judgment. One by one, people stepped forward. I watched as their lives were laid bare before them. Every action, every word, every secret thought they had ever carried. But what struck me most was how their hearts were revealed. Not just what they had done, but why they had done it. A wealthy man who had given to charities and funded churches stood before the presence of God. He had done much good, but when his heart was unveiled, I saw that his generosity had not been out of love, but out of a desire for recognition. He had given, but never truly cared. His face fell as the weight of this truth bore down on him. A woman who had been poor in life, but had loved deeply, stepped forward next. She had no great achievements, no riches, yet when her heart was revealed, it shone like the sun. She had lived in kindness, in faith, and in love. The presence of God enveloped her, and she was welcomed into peace. I trembled. This was not about race, wealth, or status. It was about the heart, the love people had or had not shown, the forgiveness they had given or withheld. Then Jesus turned to me. His gaze pierced through me, and I felt my own soul laid bare. Every moment of my life, every choice I had made, every time I had loved, and every time I had failed to love, it was all there. Tears filled my eyes. "Lord," I whispered, "I have failed in so many ways." He reached out, his touch gentle. "Do you see now?" he asked. I nodded, overwhelmed. "It was never about who we were on the outside," I said, my voice trembling. "It was always about the love we carried inside." He smiled, but there was sorrow in his eyes. And yet, so many refused to see. Suddenly, I was pulled into another vision. I saw people still on earth, living their lives as if none of this was real. I saw hatred and division continuing to grow. People clung to their fears, their pride, their bitterness, blind to the truth. And then, I saw something terrifying. A great darkness began to rise over the earth, stronger than before. People became consumed by themselves, by their desires, by their anger. It spread like wildfire, covering entire nations. The light that I had seen before, The light of those who carried God's love began to dim. I turned to Jesus, panic rising in my chest. "Lord, what is happening?" His face was solemn. "The time is short, Naomi. Many have chosen the world over me. They have chosen division over love. But the door of mercy is still open, for now." For now, my heart pounded. He looked at me with a love so deep it hurt. "You must go back." I recoiled. "No, please, Lord, don't send me back. I want to stay here with you." But Jesus shook his head. "There is work to be done. You have seen the truth. Now you must tell them." I trembled. How could I go back after all this? How could I return to a world that was blind, that refused to see? "Lord," I pleaded, "they won't believe me." He placed his hands on my shoulders, and in that moment, I felt strength flow into me. Some will, and for those who do, it will change everything. The vision of heaven, of the judgment, of the fate of the world, it all began to fade. I felt my spirit being pulled, drawn back into something heavy, something painful. I gasped. My eyes flew open. I was back. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The beeping of machines, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the weight of my body pressing into the hospital bed, it all felt unreal. Nurses rushed in, calling my name, astonishment on their faces. "She's back," one of them cried. I was confused. My body felt strange, heavy, as if I had been gone for a long time. I later learned that my heart had stopped for several minutes, long enough that they thought I wouldn't return. But I had. Jesus had sent me back. For days, I lay there, trying to understand everything I had seen. The love, the judgment, the truth about humanity. But I felt something unfinished, something more Jesus wanted to show me. And then, one night, it happened. I drifted into a deep sleep, and immediately I knew this was not an ordinary dream. I was pulled into another vision, just as vivid and real as before. I stood in a great open field surrounded by rolling hills and towering trees. The sky was neither day nor night, but something in between, a golden glow that felt alive. The air was thick with something indescribable, like the presence of God himself. Then Jesus appeared before me again, his radiant presence filling me with both peace and anticipation. "There is still more to see," he said. With a wave of his hand, the scene changed. I saw people, thousands, maybe millions, white people, scattered across time and history. Some stood in chains, not physical chains, but spiritual ones, chains of guilt, of fear, of misunderstanding. Others stood tall, powerful, their hearts burdened with a weight they could not explain. I watched as history played before me. I saw the past, generations who had taken part in oppression, in colonization, in injustices they had long forgotten. I saw others who had stood against these things, who had fought for love and justice even when it cost them everything. I saw families torn apart by the sins of their ancestors, struggling to reconcile a past they could not change. And then I saw something that shocked me. A great deception hovered over many of them, like a thick fog. Some believed they were better, chosen above others, their privilege a sign of their worthiness. But just as many believed they were irredeemable, that their past condemned them, that they carried a shame that could never be lifted. I turned to Jesus, my heart breaking. "What is this, Lord?" He looked at me with sadness. "A lie," he said, "one that has kept many from me." I watched as some clung to their pride, refusing to acknowledge the truth of history. Others clung to their guilt, unable to accept forgiveness. Both were trapped. Both were blind. Then I saw something extraordinary. A few among them, scattered but glowing with a light I recognized, the light of God's love. They were different. They had surrendered not to pride, nor to guilt, but to truth. They had repented, not just with words, but with hearts that had been truly transformed. They walked in humility, in understanding, in a love that went beyond race, beyond history, beyond the wounds of the past. And I saw what Jesus was showing me. The truth was never about black or white. It was about the heart. Sin had touched every nation. Pain had passed through every generation. No one was righteous on their own. And yet, redemption was offered to all, if only they would receive it. Jesus turned to me again. Naomi, many still do not understand. Some have twisted my gospel to justify themselves. Others have rejected my love because of the past. But I have come for all, and in my kingdom there is no division, only love. Tears streamed down my face. Lord, how can I make them see? He smiled gently. By speaking, by loving, by living the truth. The vision began to fade. The last thing I saw was a great gathering of people. Black, white, every nation, every tribe, standing together in the light of God, their hearts free, their chains broken. Then I woke up. I gasped for air, my heart pounding. The hospital room was silent, but my soul was roaring with everything I had seen. I knew then why I had returned. Jesus had sent me back, not just to share my experience, but to reveal this truth. It has never been about the color of our skin. It has always been about the condition of our hearts. And until we see each other through the eyes of Christ, we will remain blind. The morning after my vision, I sat in my hospital bed, overwhelmed by everything Jesus had shown me. My body was weak, but my spirit burned with an urgency I had never felt before. I had seen heaven. I had stood in the presence of Jesus. I had witnessed the judgment of souls, the truth about humanity, and the deception that still blinded so many. But what was I supposed to do now? I thought about my life before this experience, the struggles, the exhaustion, the moments of doubt. I had always believed in God, but I had never truly understood what it meant to live for Him. Now, after standing before Jesus Himself, I could not return to the life I once knew. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to speak. That morning, as the nurses checked my vitals, I asked one of them for a pen and a notebook. I had to write everything down before the details faded. Every vision, every word Jesus had spoken, every truth He had revealed. As I wrote, I wept. I wept for the world, for the division, the pain, the lies that kept people apart. I wept for those who had been blinded by history, by guilt, by pride, by wounds passed down through generations. And I wept for those who had been waiting for this message, for those who needed to know that love, true love, was still possible. Days later, after I was discharged, I knew what I had to do. I had to share my testimony. At first, people didn't believe me. Some dismissed it as a dream. Others scoffed, unwilling to accept a message that challenged their worldview. But then something incredible happened. One person listened, then another, and another. I spoke in churches, in small gatherings, online, anywhere I could. I shared what Jesus had shown me about the condition of our hearts, about the deception of division, about the judgment that awaited us all. And as I spoke, something miraculous happened. People began to change. I saw hardened hearts soften. I saw tears fall from the eyes of those who had carried hate for too long. I saw people of different backgrounds, different races, different histories come together, not because of me, but because of Him. I realized then what Jesus had meant when He said, "Some will listen, and for those who do, it will change everything." This is the truth I now carry. We are not defined by our past, by the color of our skin, or by the pain that has divided us. We are defined by love, the love of God, the love we choose to give to one another. And in the end, when we stand before the throne of God, it will not be our history that saves us. It will not be our race, our wealth, our achievements, or even our struggles. It will be our hearts. Did we love? Did we forgive? Did we see each other as God sees us? My name is Naomi Carter, and I was sent back to tell you this. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. Love is real. And time is running out.